Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. We all get by with a little help from our friends. I would sing it, but you would stop listening. So why are we so bad at asking for help? Social psychologist Heidi Grant joins me today to talk about why we are thinking about asking for help all wrong and the things we inadvertently do to make it weird for other people. Heidi is the author of Reinforcements, How to Get People to Help You. And her TED Talk on the topic has more than 2.8 million views. Here's the deal. We all have to ask for help, practically every day. Leadership, in many ways, is about asking people for help. The good news is there are plenty of tips and tactics that increase the chances that when you ask someone for help, they're actually going to say yes. That's what Heidi and I dig into today. And you'll want to listen to this episode before your next ask. She's sharing the simple mistakes people make when asking for help and what you should do instead. Grab your notepad for this one because it is filled with tons of practical advice to help you get to yes. Let's get right into it. Here's my conversation with Heidi Grant. To get through life, we all need to ask for help, right? Whether it's professionally or personally. Tell our listeners, why do people hate asking for help?
It's so universal too. And I think there's really a couple things that are happening. I think first and foremost, there's just sort of that feeling like there's a chance this person's going to say no. And there's a lot of research that suggests that we wildly overestimate the odds that someone's going to say no, right? That in fact, there was some studies that showed that sort of on average, people are twice as likely, even perfect strangers, to help us than we think they are. So part of it is just that we think the odds of rejection, which obviously is going to feel sort of embarrassing and awkward, we think the odds of rejection are much higher than they actually are. But a lot of it is also just a failure of perspective taking. So when we think about sort of what it's going to feel like on the other end, right? We ask this person to help us. We immediately think about, the burden it's going to be to them. We feel, guilty about wanting to put, somebody else out, right? Who may be also juggling a lot. What we don't think about is actually how good it feels to help. And because we're all helpers, right? We all actually help other people all the time. And we know from experience that actually being able to give effective help to another person is probably one of the better feelings you'll have all day, right? It's probably going to be the high point of your day because being actually able to help another person gives us this sort of warm glow. It's very reliably related to greater well-being, greater happiness. And so we know as people who give help that that's true, but somehow when we ask for help, we forget that. We just think about the burden. We just think about the guilt. We think about the awkwardness that will happen if the person says no. And all of that together just creates all this dread that makes people not want to actually ask for help.
How does your research play into leaders, right? Leaders asking for help, and tell me what you've discovered there.
What's funny is that I think that very often leaders don't think about what they're doing as asking for help. And in fact, it really is. When I wrote the book, my editor at HBR said, it's funny, this is the act of asking for help and asking for support is basically what management is. Because people, they say, well, people have to help you if you're a leader. Well, not really. I mean, they don't have to give you, we each get to prioritize what we do each day. And we get to decide how much effort we put into it. And how much of our best selves we put into it. So as a leader, you are functionally constantly asking your people for their help, right? For their support. And again, I think it's one of those things where if you do it well, and a lot of my research has been about, and a lot of other folks' research that I use in the book has really been about like what makes help rewarding to give, right? And I think that's sometimes where we as people and we as leaders can kind of go a little bit off the rails. We ask for help in ways that don't make help rewarding. I think I have like a chapter in the book called "You Made It Weird" because we do that, right? We make it weird for people when we ask for help, and so I think that's sometimes where leaders go a little bit astray. They don't think about the fact that actually the support your people give you can be very, very rewarding for them to give. We should all be thinking about how do we ask for help in ways that's going to make it a win-win, right? I'm going to get the help I need, and you're going to get to feel awesome about giving it to me. That's I think that's the main goal.
Well, and you talk about in the book how you should ask directly and do it face to face. I'm a big believer in that too, but talk about that a little bit and what you found.
So first of all, as to the direct part, there's really a couple parts to that. The first is that I think there's a lot of wishful thinking that happens for most of us. We want to believe that our need for help is obvious to other people, that the support we need is just crystal clear. We say even things, and certainly at home, often in with your partner, you'll end up in these kind of conversations where you say, you should just be offering to help, right? You should know that I need this help. And the reality is that is just not how it works. Each of us as humans is really kind of focused on our own stuff, like all day long. It's just kind of how our brains work. And very often people simply don't notice that you need help. Your needs are not even close to as obvious to other people and as clear as we believe them to be. There's actually a phrase for this in psychology. It's called the illusion of transparency. We believe that our thoughts and our feelings and our intentions and our needs are really obvious to other people, and nothing could be further from the truth. So first and foremost, if you don't ask for help, you're probably not going to get it simply because people don't realize you need it. And then the second piece that's really important is that even if people notice that you need help, they don't necessarily know that you want it. And if you've ever given someone unsolicited help that they do not want, it is a very uncomfortable experience, right? People can get offended, right? Why would you think I would need your help for this? I have teenage children. Try giving them help they don't want, and why
I'm with you, girl.
Oh, it's terrible. So there's also this real reluctance that people have to spontaneously offer help because they don't want to offend you. They don't want to offer you help you don't actually want. So there are a lot of obstacles to just getting the help you need without asking. It's really just not going to happen. So first and foremost, I think we have to just embrace this idea that you're going to have to ask for help. That's the way you're going to get it. That's the first thing. The second thing is the more specific you are, the better. I see this all the time in that people will often, kind of be reluctant to say exactly what the help is that they need. And they'll do this thing. You have a lot of contacts on LinkedIn, right? And I routinely used to get these. I don't get them anymore. I think people, because have heard me say this enough times, I don't get them as much. But people will send you an email or send you a connection on LinkedIn, and they'll say, I'd love to just get together and chat, or I'd love to pick your brain, right? And then the reality is, and they don't tell you what it is that they want. And they want something, right?
Yep.
Right? Like they want something. Nobody wants to be in a position where they're put in a position where they're asked for help they can't give, or where they don't think they would be effective at giving the help this person needs. So a lot of times what happens is, you just ignore it. You ignore these requests, or you put them off. You're much more likely to get somebody to help you if you just upfront say, I'd love to meet with you for coffee because I'd really like to ask you a little bit about X and Y, right? Okay, now I know what it is you want, and now I know that I can actually provide that help to you. So sure, that sounds good, right? So I think being specific really helps the helper to know whether or not they can give you the help you need. And Adam Grant talks a lot about this in Give and Take, right? That we all want to be givers, but we want to give good help. We want to give effective help. And sometimes the best help you can give is to tell somebody, you're not the person who can help them, but let me point you in the direction of someone who actually can. And none of that can happen if people aren't being specific about what it is they actually need.
Mm-hmm. God, Heidi, that's so interesting, because when I was a sports agent, if I asked a guy, hey, listen, if you ever hear of other, big league guys that aren't happy with their agents, let me know.
Right.
Very little would happen. But if I said, hey, listen, and I picked out a guy that I knew potentially was going through some stuff and maybe needed to make a change, if I asked my player for that specifically, can you set up dinner for us with, pick a guy, 9 out of 10 times it would happen, right? So I love that. And when you're specific, it works.
When your specific works. And you mentioned also before this idea of asking in person. And again, that's one of those things where, so again, it's the wishful thinking, right? Just like we wish people would know, like spontaneously connect you to people that, would be helpful to you. People aren't
Right.
going to do that, right?
Right.
But we also love to ask for help over texts or emails because it feels more comfortable for us, right? It's like less awkward for me because I don't have to face you when I'm making this request for help. But you know what else is less awkward? It's less awkward for them to say no, right? Because
Mhm.
they're also not facing you, right?
Sure,
So it's
sure.
like it's I can just let that email sink down in my inbox with all of the other emails, or I can just go, oh, I meant to respond to your text and I didn't. It's so easy on both parties to just sort of not really kind of do what needs to be done. So there's actually research that shows that kind of on average, it's about 30 times. I mean, this is not a small effect, 30 times more likely that somebody will give you the help you're asking for if you ask for it live. Now, obviously, with everything going on in the world, the face-to-face interactions are not as frequent as they used to be. But, getting on a phone call is the same thing because it's a live interaction with the other person. And that is just makes you orders of magnitude more likely to actually get the help you need because that person is really frankly, it is going to be more uncomfortable for them to say no. So they're more motivated to actually do it. And it's more rewarding to get to talk to you live about the help that I'm going to give you. So really that's one of those. I'll tell you one other thing that we do. So the not doing it in person or in a live conversation is one of the biggest mistakes people make. The other huge mistake they make is sending out, if you're going to send an email, okay, sometimes you have to send an email. They send it to like 20 people, right? And they say, could somebody, right, on this list help me with X? And whatever, this is actually, there's a word for this too in psychology. It's called diffusion of responsibility. When there's lots of people that can help you, no one person feels a personal obligation to do so. So if I send a message out to 20 people, then what I get is 20 people going, well, I bet one of those other 19 people probably helped her and, maybe just didn't,
She's good.
copy everyone. So she's good. I mean, it wasn't directed at me. I see this with, like I write books, and one of the most excruciating parts of writing books is when you have to ask people to endorse your book, like the little blurbs that go in the jacket. And I mean, it's so painful, and again, I wrote a whole book on helping, and this is still, I still hate doing this, right? But it's super awkward. And I see authors make this mistake all the time where they will kind of BCC everybody they know and say, hey, would you mind reading my book and writing an endorsement? And that just gets ignored because, everyone's like, well, there's probably a lot of other people on that list and one of them is doing it. And then ultimately nobody does it. So you do want to take the time. I know it's annoying, but when you want to ask 20 people for help, write 20 individual emails because that is going to dramatically increase the chances. Again, another thing Adam talks about in his book is that people want to give unique help. They want to feel like they personally were the ones who could help you because, again, that makes it so much more satisfying to me to give you help that only I could give. And when we ask 20 people at once for help, you're very clearly signaling this is not unique help. And that's going to make it less. That's one of those you made it weird things. Like you kind of ruined it for me because you made me feel like I was one in a crowd rather than someone who could be uniquely useful to you. So that's another common mistake to avoid.
Well, and what's your take on the word advice, right? So because I always tell young kids, right? When you ask for advice, you get a job, and when you ask for a job, you end up with advice. I think it's true in business. I think in business, when you ask for the business, you might just get advice. And when you ask for advice, you might just get the business. Because I think people, to your point, they want to feel successful in their ability to help. Everybody loves to give advice. Not everybody has a job or not everybody has business they can give you. Tell me how that word plays into the work that you do.
If you ask someone for something they can't give, it's just going to be terrible for everybody involved, right? It's going to make you feel uncomfortable when it doesn't work out. It's going to make them feel uncomfortable because, again, they can't maybe all they can give you is advice. And that's going to instead of that feeling rewarding, right? Well, I can't give you a job, but I can give you some advice. That's not going to feel rewarding for me. That's just going to feel lame, right? I can't, I know that I'm not giving you the thing that you want, right? I maybe comfort myself a little bit in thinking I'm giving you something useful, but it's not the thing that you wanted. One of the things I think that is our responsibility when we ask for help is to be mindful of what people can actually give and what's in their power to give, and to do a little bit of that research ahead of time to make sure that you're not asking for something that this person really isn't in a position to give you. So keeping like the scale of your request, right, really reasonable and something that you feel pretty confident someone can give you is important, because then what happens is that sometimes, to your point, you actually get more. Right? People love to give more. They love to be able to give more. So it enables people to go above and beyond, which is something they like to do. So you're better off approaching people asking for advice, or asking for, input or feedback or something like that. Something that's relatively you have high confidence this person can give you. And then you never know. Because honestly, like if they give you that, they're going to want to give you everything they can give, right? So it's interesting. If you ask people, is someone who helped you once more or less likely to help you again? Most people will say, well, I guess they're probably more likely to help me again, but they don't realize how much more. People who have helped you once are way more likely to help you again, right? Because there's actually is, first of all, they've had this experience of helping you and that was rewarding, but also sort of mentally now you're in their head as someone they help. That's the label that you have. Like, you're categorized as a person I take care of. And so if you make a reasonable request, if you start there, you're more likely to build a relationship where this is somebody who you can come to again and again. Interestingly, you are also more likely to get help from people who have rejected your request for help in the past. And that's very counterintuitive, right? Because usually you think, oh, this person didn't help me before, they're not going to help me now. Generally speaking, unless there's like kind of a sociopath or something and they don't care about people. Generally speaking, a normal person feels terrible when they can't help you, and they jump at the chance to actually provide help a second time when they're able to. Right. So we should not be, again, these common mistakes. Don't ask for more than someone can reasonably give you, but you might be pleasantly surprised when they give you more. And then also, realize that someone who's rejected your request once is actually more likely to help you a second time, not less. So don't rule people out as sources of help just because perhaps the circumstances were such that they couldn't help you last time. I actually had that happen with a book. I asked a particular person for an endorsement on a book that I wrote and never heard back. And when I wrote another book, I almost didn't ask him. And then I thought, you know what? Let me just ask him. I mean, what harm could it do, right? So I asked him, and he jumped at the chance. He apologized profusely for having ignored the request on the earlier book. It turned out he had a lot of personal stuff going on, and by the time he even saw the message, it was way past the deadline. And then he felt guilty about it, so he just never reached out to me at all. And he wrote a glowing endorsement. Like, it was like the
Wow,
nice.
very
I was like,
cool.
I felt like my mother wrote it. I mean, it was just unbelievably positive. And that's the thing, like, he was so happy to have an opportunity to do that for me and to make sure that our relationship was still good. So it's really, really important to, I think, as you said, be reasonable kind of about what people can give you, and then be pleasantly surprised when they give you more, and to not rule people out. There's a lot of help to get out there if we just ask for it.
Sure. So I want to run through a few of my favorite tips from your book on what not to do. What not to do. So one, you talk about don't apologize profusely. Tell me about that.
Oh, it's the worst. That is probably like the biggest example of "you made it weird" that I think is in the book, right? So again, giving help is really rewarding, right? It makes us feel like we are good people. It makes us feel connected to the people that we're giving help to. It is an incredible source of self-esteem. It is an incredible source of pride, right? It just makes you feel good. Again, literally, people who do research in this space call it the warm glow of helping, because that's what it feels like. Now, if I ask you for help, and I say, as I'm asking you for help, I just really hate that I have to ask you for this. I'm just so embarrassed. And, I'm sure that this is just the worst. And you probably think, that I'm terrible. Like if you do that stuff, right, where you're kind of apologizing, criticizing yourself, what it creates then in that space that could have been really positive is a ton of awkwardness and discomfort. How am I supposed to feel good about helping you when you so clearly hate the fact that you're asking me for help, right? It's making you miserable, apparently, to ask me for help, but I'm supposed to feel somehow good about that. So you're really kind of sucking all the joy of helping out of the situation. You're not making yourself look any better. And you're really robbing that other person of the ability to enjoy helping you. So there's really no place for apologies in asking for help. And none of us should feel, by the way, that we should have to apologize. The need for help is universal. There is no one in the world who, the nature of work in the modern world is that you cannot be successful at literally anything without the support of other people. So it's the boat we're all in. We really don't need, we have nothing to apologize for when you ask for help, nothing at all. And doing so actually damages the ability of that other person to enjoy it. So it really is something for your sake and theirs you just should never do.
That's awesome. And then you say, don't emphasize how much the other person will love helping you.
Oh, yeah, well, that just feels phony, right? Again, and this has to do with the idea that when helping is satisfying, it's satisfying because you're helping for the sake of helping, right? That it's sort of intrinsically motivating, right? Like I'm doing this for the sake of doing it because the act of helping you is going to make me feel really good. Now, when people try to kind of play around with that a little bit and go like, "Oh, you're going to love this." Now suddenly I'm being told how I feel about this, right? I feel like I'm being controlled, right? I'm being manipulated by you rather than doing something because I want to do it. And there's tons of research that shows this, right? That when people begin to feel controlled or manipulated, it can ruin things they would have totally done spontaneously if you hadn't tried to control and manipulate them. Because that need for autonomy, right? That need for feeling like a sense of agency, I'm doing this because I want to do it, is really, really important to people. And it's very dangerous to mess with that. And so you just, again, take all the joy out of helping when you make people feel like they got kind of tricked or goaded or manipulated into doing it. There's no fun in that.
Sure, sure. And then you say, don't portray the help you need as insignificant, right? Or tiny.
Right. No, because again, that is going to diminish my ability to feel like I had an impact. And that piece of it is so important. The thing that is most satisfying about helping is knowing that the help landed, right? That it had an impact on somebody else. If you diminish that in any way, once again, you're kind of sucking all of the joy and the motivation out of it for me. Don't make it seem like it's going to be a small thing when it isn't. Don't tell people how they're going to feel about it. Keep it simple. Ask for the help you need, and then rather naturally, because people are naturally pro-social, they're naturally helpful. The rest takes care of itself.
Sure. And then you say, don't talk about how much their help is going to benefit you.
Oh, and that's interesting because I think, and that's really more of a emphasis thing. It's not that you can't say, oh, it's going to really it's going to have, a lot of positive effect on me, but it's that it's even better to say, to connect your expressions of gratitude to what's awesome about that person, right? So if, let's say you help me with something, right? And I say, oh, Molly, it was so great that you helped me because I was so amazing in that meeting because of the advice you gave me. And I was so successful and I landed the client and everyone was impressed. And I'm describing for you the effect your help had on me, right? A better way, a more satisfying way to express gratitude is, Molly, the advice you gave me was so incredibly beneficial. And I just really think that you have a unique way of thinking about the client's perspective. And I benefited so much from that because, your insights. So see how I'm making it about you? right? So that again allows people to, why does it feel good to help? It feels good to help because yes, I feel like I'm a good person when I help, but also that unique piece, right? Like what was uniquely helpful in the help I was able to give. When you express gratitude and kind of reflect back on what it was about the helper that made their help so amazing, that's the best way, right? So it's not like you shouldn't say how it impacted you, but it's just so gratitude is so much more effective when it's really about the unique qualities of the helper.
I've had the opportunity to sit down with more than 100 leaders from all different backgrounds on this podcast, from CEOs to entrepreneurs to athletes, coaches, authors, you name it. So grateful. These conversations have challenged me. They've challenged me to think differently about leadership. So I came up with 7 mindset shifts that we can all make to reimagine our role as leaders. And to take it a step further, here's the thing. I also created a playbook of 7 exercises to accompany each mindset shift. Download it for free at mollyfletcher.com/mindset shifts. Again, that's mollyfletcher.com/mindset shifts. Tell me this. So we've talked about what not to do. Now let's talk about what to do. Let's shift about what to focus on. So you talk about how can we leverage group identity?
So the idea with group identity is that we as humans are very naturally motivated to help people we see as a part of our team, right? As a part of our tribe. This is just wired into the human species that, it was a big part of how we survived, right? As we're not very formidable creatures, right? We don't have like claws and fangs. We're not particularly strong. The way humans survived for all of humans' history was to really kind of band together. And so because of that, we're really sensitive to and really motivated to help people that we see as part of our group, as part of our tribe, as part of our team, right? And so when you can activate that for another person in your request by sort of subtly reminding them of the sort of the team identity you share, right? That can be very helpful because it taps into that desire that I have to help people that I see as what it basically boils down to is as you're asking for help, kind of talking about those kind of group identities you share, right? Maybe maybe you start out the request by reminding them it's like, oh, it's so great to, get to talk to you because, I remember when we worked together on Project X, right? So that reminder of we were a team, we did things together. We had shared goals. We're on the same side. We believe the same things. All of those kinds of things remind people of that kind of sense of group identity that you share. And that just naturally motivates them to be more likely to help you and take that time, right? And make you a priority because they see you as a teammate.
Well, and you talk about how to, identify sort of shared experiences and feelings versus maybe me saying, hey, we both went to Michigan State and da-da-da-da-da.
Right.
There's better. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, that can, so a couple of things. I think that, we both went to Michigan State isn't a terrible opener, although it can feel a little manipulative, right? Like it's a little obvious. And that's always, again, something you want to avoid, right? Being a little too obvious about these things. But there's all kinds of ways we can feel a shared identity. We can feel a shared identity with people we went to college with. We can feel a shared identity with people that we, I live in New York. I feel a shared identity with other New Yorkers. But the strongest sense of shared identities come not from sort of labels or categories that we belong to, but the strongest shared identities come from those feelings like we had the same goal. We have the same values. We have the same experiences. You and I saw something the same way. And so just on the sort of, if it's a sort of a continuum of connectedness, those sort of more superficial categories, like we went to the same school, we live in the same place, we both do the same job. Those have some connectedness that they create for you, but the strongest connectedness is we both value the same things. We both work towards the same things. We both shared a similar life experience that was meaningful. That's when we feel really strong connection to other people. And that's the best stuff to tap into when you're looking for support.
Got it. Cool. So talk about all the bars you went to in college
Yeah.
versus in those experiences. I'm just kidding. So let's say someone has agreed to help you. And are there specific things that we should do when we're following up to thank them, to show
Oh, yeah.
gratitude?
Specific things to do and not do, I'd say. So the most important thing is the follow-up itself, the act of following up, letting people know the impact that they had. And very often we do not do that. I was a university professor for a very long time. I have no idea how many hundreds of letters of recommendation for jobs, for law school, medical school, graduate school of all kinds of undergrads that worked with me. Probably about 5% of them, I know what happened. Other ones, you just sort of like throw your help out into the ether and hope for the best. And no one ever bothers to come back and tell you whether or not your help landed, whether or not you were effective. And it's less about, I want people to come back and say thank you so much. It really is, I want to know, did I put a bunch of time and effort into that? Did it help you? Like, did it actually get you where you wanted to go? Because that's the moment when help is the most satisfying. We get some satisfaction out of the act of helping itself, but we get the most satisfaction out of knowing that the help was effective. And too often we forget to do that. We ask a colleague for help at work and they help us and we say thanks, but we don't necessarily follow up and go, by the way, I want you to know, here's what happened. Here's how it all panned out for me, because that's the moment that's going to be like crazy satisfying for people. And it makes, again, why do we do that? Partly because it's the right thing to do. You want people to feel really good about the help they gave. They deserve that. But also, it is what builds up that reciprocal relationship where that person becomes even more likely to help you again in the future because it was so satisfying to help you in the past. And we should be thinking about that relationship. We want ongoing support. We don't just want one-time support. And it's very different. People always say like, well, oh, you've said that it's not good to promise people rewards for helping you. And so I guess I shouldn't give a gift. And let me just be super clear about that. What you don't want to do is at the time you ask for help, if it's someone you actually have a relationship with, offer them a reward. Because that actually changes the dynamic, right? So if you're a stranger and I ask you to help, if you're somebody that literally I say, will you do this for me and I'll pay you? If you're a stranger, that's just commerce, that's just an exchange. That's perfectly reasonable. But if you're a friend or a colleague with whom I have a relationship and I say, will you help me? If you do, I'll give you $100. That is weird,
Sure.
right? I mean, that you've just turned your friendship into commerce, right? You've just literally dropped it down a notch in terms of its level of importance and intimacy. You don't pay friends to help you. And so very often we try to sort of sweeten the pot and we think people will be more motivated to help us if we sort of offer rewards for helping, but we don't realize you're actually ruining the relationship and you're changing that dynamic. However, a spontaneous gift that was not promised, right? So somebody does something nice for you and then they watch your cat. So here's what not to do. Don't say, if you watch my cat, I'll buy you a bottle of wine. That's terrible, right? But if they watch your cat and then you come back and you bring them a bottle of wine spontaneously to say thank you, that's lovely because now it's not payment. Now it is just gratitude. So gifts and rewards that are given as expressions of gratitude are totally fine. Ones that are promised as payment, you really do run you're signaling very clearly to that person that you don't have the relationship with them that perhaps they thought you did. And that's very dangerous to do.
You're making it transactional at some level in nature. Sure.
Exactly. And that feels creepy. Why would you offer to pay me? I'm supposed to be your friend, right? People really can be offended. And at minimum, you're going to demotivate them in terms of actually helping you.
Yeah, that's cool. A lot of people assume that the motivating force behind human behavior is this desire for happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But you say it's actually to be effective. I totally agree with this. What do you mean by that? Walk our listeners through that a bit.
if you think about it for a second, because it seems so intuitive, right? That, well, what do people want? They want to be happy. And they do, by the way, they do want to be happy. That is, it's not a thing that we don't want. We do. But if you actually look at the way each of us spends our day, what you immediately see is that it can't be that the primary motivating force in people's behavior is happiness. Because I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of my day sitting at a computer dealing with frustrating emails and technology that doesn't want to work for me and complex things. And I would not say that every moment of that day I'm making choices that make me happy, but I am making choices that make me effective. They make me good at my job, right? They make me able to impact the world around me in a particular way. And that is satisfying. And if you look at, people who are marathon runners, right? Athletes, a lot of their day is grueling getting into the kind of shape they need to get into. That they're not doing that because it makes them happy, but they're doing it because it makes them really effective, right? And that's really fundamental to humans, is a desire to be able to know the world, and you sort of understand the world around us and to impact the world around us. And that is that desire to be effective. And so people will do things and routinely do things every day that make them unhappy, but make them effective, right? We are constantly making those choices. If you think about somebody who sacrifices their lives or puts their lives at risk for other people, they're literally in danger of never being happy again. But in so doing, they can be incredibly effective, like it's supremely effective, right? So it's not that we don't care about happiness. It's just that happiness isn't the thing we care about most. Someone asked me the other day, with everything going on in the world and everyone is so stressed, I feel particularly bad about asking for help, because I know that the people I'm asking for help from are also stressed, right? Are also juggling a ton of things. So how do I not feel guilty about asking people for help during this time? And once again, it's the idea that you're giving someone a little bit of something extra to do, and therefore you're going to make them unhappy, right? Really isn't the point. You're giving them a little something extra to do, but that thing you're giving them to do, done correctly, can make them feel really effective. And that is actually much more crucial for our well-being and our sense of meaning as human beings than happiness is. Happiness is sort of fleeting. But effectiveness and meaning are lasting. They're lasting sources of well-being. So yeah, we all like to be happy, but we're all very willing to sacrifice our happiness to feel effective. And that's super important to remember when it comes to asking for help. And again, why it's so critical to make sure that your helper gets to feel effective, that you are asking them for help that they can give, and you're helping them to understand how unique they are in their ability to give it to you, and that you're following up to tell you that the help they gave you really landed.
Heidi, I mean, and you touched on, right, with everything going on, and I know a lot of people are struggling right now, whether it's, an individual trying to stay motivated, right, or a leader trying to keep their teams motivated, and you've done a ton of research in the space of motivation as well. How should we think about our approach to motivating others right now, and also our own teams?
Right now, I think the biggest problem that we have is the extraordinary amount of uncertainty that people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Our brains were not built for this. So we have for most of human history, right? We were hunter-gatherers, and we have a hunter-gatherer brain. That's the brain we each have between our ears. There's been no significant evolution in how human brains work. So we have hunter-gatherer brains designed to adapt to that environment in a very different modern world. And what our brains are, we have the ability to deal with unpredictable threats, but we were never meant to deal with this many. For most of human history, we were kind of focused on what's happening now and what's kind of maybe going to happen tomorrow. Life was relatively predictable. We could rely on our habits to help us survive. And yes, we have that capacity in the brain to deal with things that are unpredictable, to deal with sudden changes, but we generally didn't deal with that many of them. And often, frankly, we didn't do so well when they did occur. Now you've got that brain in a modern world. And the amount of uncertainty is unprecedented. I mean, we've all been talking about, how volatile the world is for a long time. Right now, nothing is the same. I mean, people's everyday habits have all been upended. Their ways of working have all been upended. Their sense of certainty about their jobs, or their job prospects, if they're out of work, more uncertain than ever before. Their dynamics with their families, more uncertain than ever before. The fact that we still don't actually know when we're all getting out of this, more uncertainty, I think, than probably ever before in human history. And you see the toll that that's taking, because actually, of all the things human beings find threatening that are psychological in nature, uncertainty is the biggest one. We don't like it. It's massively aversive. So if you think about it, everybody's brain is in a state of threat all day, every day, just because of all the uncertainty that's around us. So getting back to then, how do you motivate people? How do you kind of manage this? You try as a leader to give people whatever certainty you can. And there are often ways that you can create certainty for people. So transparency is really important right now. Even telling people you don't know what the answer is to something, but just being explicit about that, like, here's the situation, I don't know the answer. Directing them towards the things they can be certain about. Now is also, people are shying away even more from giving each other feedback. And it's the exact opposite of what they should be doing. People think, oh, well, people's emotions are really fragile, so I can't give them feedback about, what they're doing that could be maybe ways they could be more effective. I just don't want to give feedback at all right now because everybody's so emotional. Honestly, one of the few sources of certainty that you have at your disposal as a leader is telling people where they stand, how they're doing, what they're doing well, and where there's some opportunities for them to become even more effective, right? And how you can support them in becoming even more effective. So done well, given well, feedback is one of the greatest gifts you can give people right now because it gives them certainty. They want to know where they stand. They want to know what they can do. They want to feel effective. And we all feel so weirdly ineffective right now because things are so crazy. So I think that is really the key. As a leader, it's less about sort of inspirational rah-rah messages right now because nobody can even hear that. And it's not going to even sound authentic. But it is more about, okay, where can I, as a leader, give people a little more clarity, a little more certainty around how they're doing, what's expected of them, what they can do to be successful in this environment, what I'm thinking as a leader, the decisions I'm making, the information that's going into those decisions and how I arrived at them. The more transparency and clarity and feedback we can give people right now, the more it will calm that part of the brain that just frankly right now feels like we are flying blind.
So transparency, feedback, be real, I'm hearing you
Yeah,
say. Be constructive.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's
Be as
cool.
authentic as you can right now.
Mhm,
People will
mhm,
respond to it.
mhm. A lot of our listeners, I probably know you from your books, right? And one of the books you wrote that I love is 9 Things Successful People Do Differently. I love it. What's the difference, right? You sort of talk about what's the difference between people who reach their goals and people who don't?
And usually not the things we think. And that's why I wrote the book, right? Because, when we think about our own goal, and this is true, honestly, if we were good at knowing why we succeeded and why we failed, I probably just wouldn't even have a job because like that's my whole career has been sort of studying those places where our intuitions about this stuff turns out to be wrong. And they're all over the place. So generally speaking, when people think they when they didn't achieve a goal, they blame it on one of 3 things. They'll say, well, I guess I didn't want it enough. So they think it's a failure of commitment. They'll say, well, I guess I didn't have the willpower, right? I didn't have the self-control, especially if it's like a willpower related goal, like dieting, exercise. Or they'll say, I just don't have what it takes, right? I don't have the ability. That you hear this in expressions like, I'm not a math person, I'm not a computer person, I'm not good with people, right? We just decide that there are whole domains of ability that we don't have. We didn't win the DNA lottery. We didn't get those genes, right? And it turns out that most of the time, all 3 of those are wrong. But the last one is almost always wrong. Because ability doesn't really work like that. It's not that genes don't matter, but they don't matter nearly as much as we seem to think. What matters is experience. You don't become good at math without trying. And so most things are about effort, experience, strategy, all the stuff we know. The commitment piece can be an issue. It's not that commitment isn't important, but a lot of times we have plenty of commitment and we just don't reach the goal anyway. And the same thing with willpower. That can be an issue, right? We need to not put temptation in our way and distractions, that will tend to derail us. But again, it's usually not the problem either. The problems boil down to things like, when you set out to pursue a goal, did you get specific enough about what the goal is? Or did you set it in a sort of abstract, like, I want to be more successful, which isn't helpful because it doesn't guide your behavior. What does that mean? How do I use that to make choices? Did you get specific enough about the specific actions you need to take? And when and where you're going to take them. I always like to say to people when I talk about this, raise your hand if you've ever said, I meant to work out today and I didn't have time. And everybody raises their hand, right? And then I say, okay, so that's not true. Like, it feels like it's true, but what's actually true is you had time and you chose to do other things with it. And maybe those were fine choices and maybe they were good choices. But the reality is, a lot of times we fail to reach goals because we miss opportunities to act on them. There's a moment you could have worked out. You could have given feedback to someone on your team. You could have taken the time to learn a thing that you've been meaning to learn. And you just didn't do it because you missed it, right? The moment was there and then it was gone. And so planning exactly what we're going to do and when and where we're going to do it turns out to be important. So too does your mindset. How you're approaching whatever your goal is. Are you thinking of it as the kind of goal where you're going to develop and improve yourself? Are you thinking of the goal as being about proving that you're already good at something, right? Like proving that I'm smart rather than trying to get smarter. Those differences in how we even think about what we're doing turn out to really have a big effect on how resilient we are, how we deal with unanticipated changes, setbacks, challenges. So a lot of the time it's this tactical stuff, choosing how to think about the goal, choosing the right ways of planning for the goal, making sure you're monitoring your progress, right? Like making sure you're kind of checking in on your goals to see how you're doing. Like, it's this really tactical, strategic stuff. It isn't the, I don't have enough willpower, I didn't want it enough, and I guess I'm not good at this, that we always revert to. So sort of step one to being better at reaching goals is actually understanding why you didn't reach them before. And the science is really helpful there because a lot of times we just do end up blaming our failures or our setbacks on the wrong things. And if you're blaming it on the wrong stuff, you're never going to solve the problem.
So you've been so generous with your time. I want to finish with rapid fire. So I'm going to hit you with some questions. You just fire back. All right. Morning person or night owl?
Oh gosh, is there a neither option? I sort of feel like I'm good in the afternoon. I really
there we go.
Up, but I definitely also like to go to sleep. So I'm gonna go afternoon.
It sounds like a perfect scenario. Introvert or extrovert?
Introvert, definitely. I am exhausted by people in large doses.
So you're done with me, Heidi. You're done with me. I'm just kidding.
This is the perfect amount of interaction.
What was the last book you read?
Oh, honestly, the last book, here's what I do. I read for fun a lot of times. So I love reading the Percy Jackson, Rick Riordan books. I love a lot of young adult stuff. When I read all day long for my job. So at night I like to read Brain Candy.
Got it. Okay. What book has made the greatest impact on your life?
Oh, the book has made the greatest impact on my life. Probably Mindset, which is the book that my advisor, Carol Dweck, she was my PhD advisor. I got my dissertation working for Carol on growth mindset.
Well done.
I would say Mindset and the research in it has had probably the biggest effect on my personal and professional life.
I love that book too. Her work is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
What's one thing on your bucket list?
Oh, one thing on my bucket list. I have this fantasy. I love having a podcast or a show or something where I just get to interview people who are really interesting. Like, I love getting to have these conversations, and I always feel like, man, it would be just so great. And I guess you can tell me whether or not this is true, but it just seems like it'd be so great just to be able to be like, yeah, I want to talk to this person and just hear their stuff,
Yeah.
And I've always felt like somewhere on my bucket list is doing some kind of show where I actually get to be the one to ask questions of people whose stuff I think is really fascinating. So what you're doing now is on my bucket list.
That is cool. Well, you know how to get it done. I know that. Well, your stuff on CBS, the work that you've done there, I mean, it's good stuff.
That was fun.
Yeah, I've seen all that. So, all right, so the show's called Game Changers. One last question. Who's a game changer, or what game changer inspires you and why?
Oh, you know what? I would actually have to say again, going back to Carol Dweck. So for people who don't know, she's the person who coined the term growth mindset. And again, she changed this insight, right? That it's not so much your natural ability or even your ability at all. And it's not so much, the things we tend to think that matter. It's just the way you think about whatever it is you're doing, like whether you are focused on developing yourself or focused on proving yourself and validating yourself, that difference in mindset, I mean, it has changed education, right? So it has changed how teachers and parents give feedback to children and frame tasks to children to kind of enable more children to thrive and grow and develop. It is now changing in my own work. I see it. I look at growth mindset more through the lens of adults. And now we see an explosion of interest in growth mindset in organizations. I've worked with a ton of organizations looking at, how do we introduce growth mindset habits? How do we teach managers to give feedback that promotes growth mindset thinking? How do we change HR processes so that they support growth mindset thinking in an organization? It has been such an explosively important and totally game changing concept for across the human lifespan and around the globe.
What a gift to be able to work beside her and
Oh,
learn
I got
from her.
lucky.
Yes,
I
that
got
is
so lucky.
fantastic. Wow. Well, I can't thank you enough, Heidi. This was a cool conversation. Your work is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you for me too.
How helpful was that? I wrote down so many notes during my conversation with Heidi, and I know I'm not the only one guilty of some of the mistakes that Heidi shared. Heidi's advice challenged me. It challenged me to rethink how I ask for help, big and little asks. Here are 3 of my favorite takeaways from my conversation with Heidi. Number 1, we underestimate how much people actually want to help us. If you don't ask for help, you probably won't get it. Hello, newsflash. People need to know that you need help and that you want it. Number 2, people are more likely to help you after they said no. This one surprised me. I like this one because it's like counterintuitive. Too often, we don't ask people for help because they've said no before. But Heidi shared that someone who has rejected your request once is actually more likely to help you the second time, not less. How interesting is this? Most people jump at the chance to help you a second time when they're able to. Number 3, tell people how their help was effective. This is a big one. There's a common misconception that what's rewarding about helping is the act of helping itself, but that's not true. What is rewarding is knowing that your help landed, that it had an impact, and that you were effective. If someone gives you help, follow up. I love that one. Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.